Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you all again. I'm Sean Nelson, also with ADF International, and I'll be introducing all of our amazing speakers today. First to speak will be Reverend Johnnie Moore. Johnnie Moore is the founder and CEO of the Kairos Company and president of the Congress of Christian Leaders. He is familiar to this crowd as a former commissioner of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He is a recent co-author with Rabbi Abraham Cooper of The Next Jihad, Stop the Christian Genocide in Africa. And he has kindly donated to all the attendees here a copy of his deeply thoughtful and compelling book that I strongly encourage you to read. He is also a well-known advocate for religious freedom in the Middle East and helped draft the landmark Bahrain Declaration on Religious Freedom and Peaceful Coexistence in the Middle East. He is also a recipient of the Medal of Valor from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Please welcome Johnnie Moore.
Nigeria should be Africa's crown jewel. It's the continent's most populated country. It has its largest economy. It's brilliant in its diversity, and increasingly, however, it is divided along religious lines. Nigeria has always been irresistibly rich in resources, and in the past, those resources have been a challenge. Colonial powers exploited it, post-colonial leaders often corrupted it, and now terrorists threaten its destruction, beginning with its Christians, but ensuring that every Muslim that dare stand in their way faces a similar and brutal demise. And unfortunately, the situation isn't getting better, it's getting worse. And as we've heard already this evening, an insurgency in the Northeast is now also in the Northwest. The issues in the Middle Belt and the center of the country are now endemic. The Southeast, even the Southeast, is less stable, and in Lagos itself, we've witnessed state-sanctioned violence. The French intellectual Bernard-Henri Lévy was right when he wrote in the Wall Street Journal nearly 3 years ago, "A slow-motion war is underway in Africa's most populous country. It's a massacre of Christians, massive in scale and horrific in brutality, and the world has hardly noticed." He said that 3 years ago. His observation remains absolutely true. It is also insufficient to describe the breadth and the complexity of Nigeria's security and human rights challenges. We must tonight, once again, consider the potential consequences of the current trajectory, and we must always remember the victims along the way. The fact of the matter is, it is not inconceivable that we could see a caliphate in portions of Africa that make the horror that we saw at the hands of ISIS in 2014 and 2015 pale small in comparison. The fact of the matter is that we already have failed states within a failed state. Africa's largest country, most populous nation, and largest economy is witnessing a 5-alarm fire within its borders. And rather than taking the threat seriously, unfortunately, the United States and its allies around the world continue to treat Nigeria and the other crises in the region like an afterthought. And when you couple the situation in Nigeria with other situations around the world, we are witnessing a resurgence of terrorism that you would think by now we had learned these lessons, and clearly we haven't. And it's easy, by the way, to exclusively look at the situation through the lens of foreign policy or humanitarian concerns or security, and we must do all of those things. In fact, all of those factors must be factored into the equation. But what's most important is that we remember the victims. I want to say some of their names. Patience was 13. Revelation was 6. Rejoice was 4. I would love to meet Christian parents that named their children Patience, Revelation, and Rejoice, but they died too. And they weren't the only victims and not the only young victims in the village during that attack last year. The terrorists killed at least 20 as they went from house to house. They put a bullet in the head of a 3-month-old. They hacked to death a 6-year-old. We don't know the names of those children. We do know the name of a 14-year-old girl who was murdered along with her parents. Her name was Blessing. And there are thousands like them, and we don't and may never know their names. We're also hearing stories of faith that are stronger than the terror. When I was in Nigeria 18 months ago with Rabbi Abraham Cooper, we sat with a pastor whose church had been burned down twice. And yet he continued to serve in that region. And he told us the story of negotiating the release of a captive in his church. He sold all of his possessions to get her back. The government was no help to him. He just took the situation in his own hands. I read the story of a young seminarian named Michael who was killed for his faith alone. And he wasn't just killed for his faith. He was killed because he kept sharing the gospel that he believed in with his captor. And when they eventually found the guy, he said that he was annoyed by the passion that this Christian had in sharing his faith, so he killed him. And of course, there's Pastor Ndimi. I'll never forget watching a video as Pastor Ndimi's wife, after his beheading, said on national television in Nigeria and spread throughout all of Africa, "I thank God my husband did not denounce his faith." She remembered his last words that she saw him say to their family on a horrifying video, akin to what we've seen with ISIS in the past. He said to her, "Don't cry and don't worry." She said, "I thanked God that my husband did not denounce his faith." And in the middle of this conversation, her son interrupted, her adult son, and he asked for the microphone. And he said, "Praise the Lord. Our daddy used to advise us and encourage us to stand firm in our faith no matter what happened." And they have stood firm. And now it's time that we stand with them. And by the way, you don't even have to be a Christian or religious at all to stand with them. In fact, we need to ask ourselves a question, and that question is, what kind of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where allies of the United States, as large and influential as Nigeria, can maintain the status quo while rendering millions of believers helpless in front of evildoers, while receiving 800,000 pounds a day from the British government, $1 billion in taxpayer money a year from the United States government? Do we want to live in a world where American and European diplomats can openly negotiate with Iranian mullahs who deny the Nazi Holocaust and plot every day to destroy the state of Israel? Do we want to live in a world where communist diplomats from China sit in the hallowed halls of the United Nations and hijack the human rights agenda while they imprison millions of Muslims and destroy churches and take over Hong Kong? We are among the fortunate ones that live in the world's freest nation in all of human history, the United States of America, and that is a responsibility. We have been blessed and empowered with the tools to help shape the type of world we want to live in if we just use those tools. The great Simon Wiesenthal said, "Freedom is not a gift from heaven. It must be earned every day." And Wiesenthal knew what he was talking about because he knew the alternative. He lost 89 members of his family during the Holocaust. When he was liberated from Mauthausen by American soldiers, he weighed 89 pounds. And prior to the horrors of the war and of the Nazi genocide, Wiesenthal had completed a degree in architecture. He could have easily reaped a fortune in rebuilding of Europe and post-war. Instead, he invested his entire life in a different mission. He became the world's foremost Nazi hunter. He dedicated his entire life, surrounded by former Nazis in Vienna, to becoming the unelected ambassador and advocate of 6 million ghosts, the Jews killed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. Rabbi Marvin Heyer writes that Simon Wiesenthal was unable to let go of those terrible memories that haunted him, especially the memory of having chased after the cattle car that carted off his beloved mother to the death camps without her ever knowing of his desperate attempt to run after that train to bid a final farewell. By the time he died at 96, he had helped bring hundreds of Nazi war criminals to justice, and not just ordinary criminals, people like the commandant of Treblinka, the inventor of the mobile gas vans that killed hundreds of thousands. Wiesenthal was once asked, "Why do you do this? When is it enough?" in his 90s. And he replied, "The Nazis almost succeeded at obliterating the concepts of justice, and I must work to revive justice." He wrote, "My cause is justice, not vengeance. My work is for a better tomorrow and a more secure future for our children and grandchildren who follow us." One day, I'll have the honor of stepping forward and saying to the victims, "I have not forgotten you." The cause of Nigeria is our cause. It is the most neglected and maybe the single most important issue in our world, and the trajectory has to change now.